back over to you, June. Thank you.
Okay, well, just to briefly review for all of you up and coming calls. In May, we have a conversation with the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. That's with the co-executive directors, Herman Perotti and Shaylin Suzelis. It's the only disability-led organization focused on equity for people with disabilities in emergencies and disasters. And it'll be a conversation similar to today. And using the same format in June, we'll have a similar conversation with the World Institute on Disability in terms of their disaster and climate resilience projects. And that'll be with Dawn Skaggs. And in July, we have CFILC's program logistics manager, Lisa Austin, and she's going to talk about all about batteries to power life-saving and supporting equipment and sustaining the devices in emergencies. You know, where are we and where are we going with alternative power sources? In August, we've got Andy Imparato, who's the director of Disability Rights in California, and he'll talk about the task force that he was a part of, the Presidential COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force. That task force, I think, finished up their work in November, but they had a number of ongoing steps, and we'll hear about, you know, how's that going? Are they monitored? And what do we need to know? And in planning for September, we have a look at California's power shutoffs, power safety, in terms of the future. You know, what have we learned and what do we need to advocate for related to embedding and sustaining what's been done so far and what needs to be revised, changed, augmented. So that should be interesting as well. And on the 4th Thursday of this month, well, actually, we typically have our strategy calls, but Russell, are you on today to brief us on where we are with that?
I am, June.
Over to you.
I am. And thank you, June, for setting me up. Hello, everyone. I am Russell Rawlings. I am the statewide community organizer here at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. And I'd just like to share with you all that we are going to be making a bit of a pivot with the coalition for now. This will be my last meeting with the Disaster Strategies Coalition. And for now, we are looking to make a pause on the networking and organizing meeting that happens on the 4th Thursdays. However, I have every bit of confidence that the new statewide community organizer will help pick up that space again, and there won't be a very large gap because there's already some applicants coming in. So as of right now, though, next month's networking and organizing meeting this month's networking and organizing meeting that would happen on the 28th will not be occurring, but I hope that hopefully for May it will be up and going again. So thanks, Jill.
Well, Russell, from my perspective, you will be missed, and we wish you the best of luck.
I guess I should add too that I will still be around. I expect to be watching and following all of your great progress going forward, and just know that I'll be around as a community member. I'm still here in California, still very invested in all of the work that you're doing. So thank you, June, for being a mentor for me and for so many others. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Vance today too. So thank you so much.
Okay, so heads up to all. If you'd like to introduce yourself in chat, please go ahead and do so. Name, organization, and if you want, your email. And as you participate, just let us know who you are before you speak. In chat, we'll already know from your label that you use. So we learn lots from you in terms of your honest feedback. So give us feedback in chat. We'll do a poll at the end of the call for more feedback. And if you can't access the poll, we will provide in chat and also on the list a listserv, a Survey Monkey link where you can give us some feedback. So thanks in advance for doing that. And so today, today, I guess I need to start by saying I sometimes, sometimes I think people think that I am channeling Vance Taylor because I get asked things like, well, what does Vance think? Or what's Vance doing? Or questions like that all the time. And I think, well, I don't know, ask them. So this is your chance to ask Vance and hear from Vance. So Vance Taylor, the chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office.
Sorry, June. I muted you on accident. I was trying to let someone in.
Okay, so how far did I get?
You had just introduced Vance, so if you can do that again, I'm sorry.
All right. Rewind and repeat. Vance Taylor is the chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. So we asked Vance today to talk about the history of his office, his vision, a little bit about his staff and their roles, current projects, future goals, and community engagement. So Vance will talk for a little bit, maybe 15, 20 minutes or so, and he'll leave a good 60 to 70 minutes or more for good conversation, questions, and discussion. So Vance, over to you.
All right, thanks, Jane. Appreciate being here. Appreciate everybody that's on. And yeah, I was looking through the list and I was like, I know a lot of these people. It's great. It's good to be with friends. Some of you who I haven't seen in far too long, but COVID's taking us all online. So I guess in that way we got to interact. Hey, so thanks, June, for the intro and thanks for the opportunity. Any chance I get to be here, this is where I want to be, right? So there's a lot of places I have to be. This is where I want to be. So it's nice. I will give just sort of a background, and then I really just want to be conversational, right? I always feel like that's where the best learning and leaning forward occurs is in that back and forth engagement. So I promise not to talk your ear off. But I do want to talk a bit about myself and also the office, or about why we exist and what we do. So by way of personal background, I'm a native Californian. I grew up, I was born in Sonoma County. I spent a few years up in Humboldt and then moved back to Sonoma County. I graduated high school at 17. And I should say, before, of course, that happened, I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at age 7. I started using a power wheelchair. By the time I was in 6th grade, that was mostly because I was falling a lot. And so it became a safety issue. And then by the time I hit about 8th grade, is when I lost the ability to actually walk. And so the majority of my life I've spent using a power wheelchair. At the time that I was diagnosed, the school district I was in made the assumption that because I had a physical disability, that I should not go to mainstream school. And so my mom had to do that thing where, you know, the mom goes down to the superintendent's office and threatens a lawsuit. And thankfully the school ended up doing the right thing. And of course, then she said, you better do well in class, you know. So added pressure there, but I ended up doing well academically, very involved, student body officer, that sort of thing. I went out of state for college, which was this great opportunity, right? Because there's a lot of independence, a lot of new freedom, but it also meant that I was doing things like managing care attendants for the first time. I graduated when I was 17, so to be a 17-year-old manager, if you will, as well as first-time college student, has its complexities. But as everyone on this call understands, that's kind of the dynamic of our lives, right? Is that we don't have the luxury, if you've got a disability or an active functional need, you don't always have the luxury of just kind of doing one thing, right? You're always juggling, you're always spinning plates, and you're always managing the complexities of life. And that builds a certain level of resilience and ingenuity and really innovation that I think a lot of people miss out on. For me, educationally, I got my degree. I was going to I started an MBA program. I decided to take 3 months off. I was going to do an internship in DC. I moved to DC, 3,000 miles from home, where I knew no one. That 3-month internship turned into a 13-year stint in DC. Where along the way, I worked for 2 members of Congress, directed security policy at a national trade association, and became a partner at a Homeland Security and Emergency Management consulting firm. And found, met, courted, married my sweet wife. We had 2 kids. And I was in Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and it was interesting because I'd go into a room, and first off, I was typically the only one there that used a power wheelchair. In fact, I was usually the only one there with any disability. But it was very clear that there were gaps in the way that people looked at things like emergency management from a policy standpoint. You know, it's that notion that you can be looking at the same thing and to see it so differently based on your lived experience. So I feel like even though it wasn't officially in my role to integrate access and functional needs and the work I was doing, that I was doing that anyway, just based on my own experience. Well, we thought we were East Coasters. And then, you know, they always say, if you want things to change, then get comfortable, right? So we got comfortable, and of course things changed. And had the opportunity to move back to California and serve as the chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs. And in that discussion about, should we go back? It really was a challenge because I left my job, I left our house. Kids loved their school. We were really happy. And this opportunity to come back home, while it's nice to be, kind of back around family, was a pay cut, and it was just different than what we had anticipated. But I really truly felt like there was an opportunity to move the needle in a meaningful way. Because when we spoke with the governor's office, it wasn't just, hey, we want somebody in this role to service window dressing. It was that we want somebody here that's going to be able to make a difference and help change the culture of emergency management. And so we packed everything into a minivan, drove 3,000 miles, and I was here for almost, I think, 3 weeks. And then we had the Putin Valley fires, which at the time were the 3rd and 5th worst fires in state history. And that's when you really get into it, right? Because that's when you're looking at things like, how are we communicating, and how are we evacuating, and how are we sheltering, and what does recovery look like if you've got a disability? And in California, I'll give you an example. We've had, I want to say it was the 12 years before I got here, we had 3, I think, major presidential declarations. And in this it's almost 7 years now that I've been here, we've had, I think, 15, right? So it just goes to show you that what we're experiencing in the state isn't just an increase in the number of disasters, but it's an increase in the scope and scale and devastation of those disasters. And it used to be, even when I first got here, that I'd talk to people and say, we talk about preparedness and resilience. Make a plan, be ready. And there was that sense people would say, I get that that's important, but that stuff happens to other people. And now, I don't think there's a single person on this Zoom right now that can honestly say they've not been impacted by a fire, or an earthquake, or flood, or COVID, or poor air quality because of fires, right? So it's that very real sense of each and every one of us are impacted by these incidents and events, public safety power shutoffs, right? Affecting hundreds of thousands of people at the same time. And so now when I talk about preparedness and resilience, it's extremely personal for people, because now we all have lived experience being impacted by this. I guess I should say the reason why the Office of Access and Functional Needs exists is because at a national level, we just haven't done historically a great job of integrating access and functional needs into the emergency management system. I always point to Hurricane Katrina for that, right? It was during Katrina that they said, hey, well, we're got life-saving information out there doing press conferences. which is great, but they didn't think about the fact that some people were deaf. And that without an interpreter, that message falls on deaf ears. They didn't consider the fact that some people are blind. And so when you point to an evacuation map and say, go here for safety, that doesn't really mean anything. For evacuation, it's, oh, we'll send school buses. But there was no accessible vehicles. And so, yeah, it worked for most of the people in that area, but what about when you rolled up in a wheelchair? Right? And then you're in that situation where you have to decide, well, do I leave my chair behind? Meaning I'm jeopardizing my health, my safety, my independence, dignity. Or do I stay here with my wheelchair and just kind of hope it's going to be okay? And that's a terrible choice. And then sheltering, we saw again during Katrina that there are inaccessible shelters. There were shelters on the second floor of buildings with no elevators. There was shelters and there were no wraparound services, nobody to help with feeding, toileting, transferring. And so people couldn't be independent and safe and healthy. And so California said, we got to get ahead of this, because what they recognized is that it wasn't just during major catastrophes that we saw a disproportionate impact in the way people with disabilities and access and functional needs were impacted during disasters. But it was during every disaster, regardless of the type or the scope or the scale. I mean, Katrina alone, 70% of everyone who died had an access or a functional need. And so these emergency managers, good people, right? Wanting to do good things, but really lacking the perspective that they needed to integrate their programs. So California created the Office of Access and Functional Needs, and the governor appointed a senior level executive as chief with really a twofold mission. One is to identify what are the needs that all Californians have before, during, and after disaster. And then how do you integrate those needs throughout every facet of the emergency management process? And it's really interesting. If you look up the definition of the word integrate, the actual definition is to make whole, to make something complete, right? So to integrate emergency management by adding the access and functional needs perspective is to make what is presently an incomplete system whole. And so that's what we work to do, and we work to do it in partnership with the whole community, right? It's not just, nothing about us without us. It's this recognition that when it comes to emergency management, it's so much bigger than any one group, entity, organization, or jurisdiction. It's an acknowledgement that when it comes to emergency management, we'll either fail or we'll succeed, but we'll do it together. And so this is why we work to have all the voices at the table, right? Because we want to make sure that as we move through our process, that we're doing so in a way that is equitable and fair and appropriate and properly considers and integrates what people's needs are. So, we've got staff. We're a team of 6 right now. We're about to be a team of 7. We have a variety of duties. I'll tell you some of the projects that we have worked on and will work on. Just recently, we were able to get 200,000 free at-home COVID testing kits out to high-risk Californians. We're about to do that again, and then we'll look to make that a monthly thing. We're working on a pilot with CFILC to help independent living centers secure their sites for earthquakes. Phase 2 of that will be to then provide ILCs with funding that they can distribute to their consumers so that consumers can secure their homes and apartments so that they're safer during an earthquake. We develop training, curriculum, best practices, lessons learned, and guidance for jurisdictions, for individuals, for community-based organizations. We are in the process of approving now county emergency operation plans, which is a new role for us to kind of work through that process. We work with stakeholders like June and others, of course, to interact with the community. Also do a lot of presentations, a lot of speaking gigs. You've probably heard many of my stories at other venues. We're also working on PSPS to try and address not just what the IOU's responsibility should be, but to advise the CPUC as they look to regulate IOUs, and also to support the facilitation and development of things like the DDAR program. And happy to announce that we've got in July, I'm only able to announce this as of yesterday. So I'm happy to say, please mark your calendars, July 19 and 20 from 9 a.m. to noon Pacific will be the nation's first ever National OAFN Symposium. We're very excited about this. We'll be looking at innovative and inclusive practices from across the country. And that's being organized through Cal OES in partnership with NYU and Colorado State Homeland Emergency Management Agency, as well as with the International Association of Emergency Managers. And so everything that we do isn't just to increase resilience and preparedness and safety, which are all extremely important, but it's also to affect and impact the culture of emergency management, so that as disasters strike, that access emergencies is on the forefront of people's minds, as opposed to something that gets kind of tacked on at the end. One very brief example of that is, those first fires I was telling you about. We needed portable accessible showers to help people because people just always couldn't shower. It's pretty rough. And I called the State Operations Center, and we only had access to 5 in the entire state of California. And they were all in LA at a concert. So we had to commandeer them. I used the G word, governor, which is nice to have in your title. And we commandeered these showers. So fast forward, last fire season, I got a phone call. Hey Vance, I know you haven't said anything about them yet. We don't have any active fires going right now. But we just wanted you to know our logistics team has already got access to 70 portable accessible showers. We'll move them anywhere in the state within 12 hours. And if we need more, we've got contracts across the country to bring them in nationwide. Right? When we send sheltering packages now to sites, they would send cots, for example. Well, now 10 to 15% of all those cots are accessible cots, they're ADA compliant cots. We've just built this into the way that we operate now. So also we've got this, it's funny, our press team just hired somebody new. And she was telling me about putting on a press conference that you need a camera, you need a microphone, and you need an ASL interpreter. And I kind of chuckled because she had no appreciation about the Herculean effort it was to make that a reality. Right? To her, she was just taught that, hey, this is how you do it, right? So this is just how it always was, and this is how it's supposed to be. And I love that because when she teaches somebody else, she'll teach them the same thing. Right? So we are impacting the culture and we are actually integrating these systems. So anyway, I promised not to talk the whole time, so I'm going to stop. And then if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer. You want to hear some stories, I'm happy to tell those too. And June, I don't know if you want to facilitate that or how we want that to work.
Sure thing. You all can raise your hand. Under reactions, there's a way to raise your hand, or you can put a question in chat, or you can voice a question once, if you can't raise your hand. So we'll start that way. And you know, I'm known as a person of 1,000 questions, Vance, you know this. So maybe, I'll start, first I'll check chat to see.
Sure.
But here it is. Here's a question. Regarding the state emergency operation plan and local emergency operation plans, where do we find the actionable disability content and details? The statements I often read in these plans are so vague on the details. It's so frustrating.
That's a really great question. And it's really timely as well. So let me just walk you back real quick. So 5 years ago, a bill passed and it said, hey, you are legally required now, counties, to integrate 3 sections of your emergency operation plan: comms, evacuation/transportation, and sheltering. Then, so what we saw then was that some emergency managers, they called in their access and opportunities advisory committees. They work with the community. It was great. Others just kind of did it themselves. And so we worked with the legislature and another bill was passed. And that bill said, as part of your process to update your plan, you have to do it in partnership with AFN stakeholders. Right? So you've actually got to work with the community on this. And then another bill got passed last year, AB 580. And it says that Cal OES now is reviewing all the plans. And as a part of that, jurisdictions can do what's called an AFN consultation. So I tell you this because you didn't used to see anything about integration within the plans. Then you started to see some, but we were kind of stuck on the spot, like Jim was saying, that plans would say things like, we'll have an ASL interpreter. Okay, but that was all it would say. And so there's a disaster and somebody opens up their operation plan and it says we'll have an interpreter and nobody knows how to do that. There was no next step. There was no dial this number. There was no contract in place. There was none of that. And so that's the step that we're drilling down with folks on now. Is it's not enough now to say, I'll have an interpreter. Now we're saying, show us the contract. It's not enough to say we'll have accessible transportation. Because we had this is a real example, and I won't tell you which county, but this actually happened. The plan said, we're going to work with, and they named a vendor. This vendor to provide accessible emergency transportation. That's how we're going to evacuate folks. Well, the county never actually, that was their plan, was to call that group, but they never actually contracted with them. There was never an actual MOU or an MOA with that group. So when the evacuation order went through, all the drivers evacuated and they left behind a fleet of accessible vehicles with no one to operate them. So the way that AB 580 and these other bills are now set up, that sort of thing can't happen. Because now we are able to say, okay, your plan is to use this company, show us the contract. And then we can go one step further to say, show me how this contract is going to execute, or can be executed 24/7 and at no cost to the community, right? Because those are two factors that get overlooked. I feel like it's a law of nature that disasters only happen after hours, right? On weekends, holidays. And that no cost thing is huge because we shouldn't have to pay money to leave our homes so we don't die during a disaster. And so we're looking at those factors too. So yeah, really excited about that change. So great question, June, very timely.
Thanks, Vance. That's what my takeaway is. This legislation gives you permission to look behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz and under the table and go for the real nitty-gritty details.
And the way that the law is worded, any county requesting an AFN consultation is then legally required to address our recommendations of that consultation.
Great. Christine, I see your hand up. Christine Fitzgerald.
Great. Hey, Vance, how's it going?
Hey, Christine.
Hey, great to hear about the new bills concerning the services, vans, or whatever they're gonna contract with. That's fantastic. So I won't touch on that. Although it was interesting to see San Mateo's emergency bus. That was pretty impressive. But my concern, I'll put this out there. My concern is I've been in several of the emergency trainings for Caltrain and Amtrak, and kind of a crossover. And this last time we did a power line down across the tracks. The idea is that we're moving over to all electrical, engines. And the concern is to have, evacuation processes in place. Here's the thing that I experienced was that it wasn't really real world. It was hosted at an actual stop, and I pointed it out to the folks, saying the likelihood of it happening right here in an actual stop is slim to none. How would you, for instance, work in an area such as the marshes in Martinez? And they were kind of stumped, and I said, okay. One other thing to consider is, what are you going to do about my chair? You get me out of the train. How are you going to reconnect me with my chair? And their comment was, well, we'll give you basically a rain check, so you can get your chair back, and we'll get it to you at some point in the future. Now, as you well know, power chairs are extremely expensive. Any durable medical equipment is expensive, but when you rely on it for everyday use, it elevates that to a higher degree. My question to you is, what can be done, or what is being done, to better ensure that the DME, is routed back, or even goes with the individual? Let's look at it from both directions.
Great question, Christine. Over to you, Vance.
You kind of cut out just a little bit at the end. Jim, can you restate that for me?
Well, Christine wants to know, what are the details of, I'll broaden out the question. When you as a chair user are rescued from any event, whether it's near railroad tracks or auto accident, or help in evacuating your home, and what's the plan to get your mobility device back to you ASAP versus someday we'll get it back to you? That's what I heard.
Yeah,
Yep.
and Christine, it's a great question, and unfortunately, it's not one that I can answer. There's a lot of variability on if it's a private company, if it's a public company, if it's plane, train, automobile. I don't know. On the emergency management side, when we look at, okay, so somebody gets evacuated, if you were to call and say for evacuation assistance, that's why we push so hard to be able to send an asset or a transportation resource that's going to allow you to take your equipment with you, right? I've talked to people in shelters before who evacuated their home so quickly that their neighbors came and picked them up out of their chairs, laid them in the bed of the pickup truck, drove away. And I had a lady tell me what it was like to watch as her home burned down with her wheelchair inside. So there are things we can do to make sure that vehicles are accessible and people can take equipment. And then there are some circumstances where a disaster moves so fast, it's just, you just got to go, right? It's all about trying to save a life as opposed to equipment. On that front, we've tried to work to address the issue of lost or damaged equipment. We facilitated the development of a national MOU. First, we piloted it with the city of Sacramento. Then we broadened it to statewide in California. And now it's national, and it's an agreement between the American Red Cross and New Motion. New Motion is the largest provider of complex rehab technology in the country. And now, if you're at a shelter and you need a replacement chair, or if your chair is damaged and you need somebody to come assess and repair it, that can all be facilitated through that agreement. So it doesn't answer your original concern about, hey, if I'm on a train and I get derailed, I get removed, when do I get my chair back? But in a more traditional disaster, if you end up at a shelter and either you're with your equipment but it's damaged, or you had to leave so quick that your equipment was left behind and destroyed, then it can at least be replaced. And the idea there is that it would be expeditious, right? Replace, but okay, call me in 6 weeks doesn't really do much for us, right? There's a level of immediacy that we need. So that's how we try and tackle that issue.
I think that the contract with New Motion or the MOU or agreement involving the Red Cross, I think is a great first step. Christine, in LA, several years ago, there was a lawsuit about lack of detail regarding disability content in plans. And one of the things that LA City instituted when the mobility device was not damaged, or was maybe damaged but not destroyed, is that they had a some trucks, I forgot what they call them, with lifts that could be dispatched to the site to pick up the mobility device and deliver it to wherever the user was taken. So I think that's another promising, that's another good practice that was instituted, and it's up to all of us to make sure it's embedded and sustained. More questions?
Hey, Vance, this is David.
Hey, David, how you doing, man?
Okay, how are you?
Good, good. Good to hear you and good to see you.
Good to see you. What do you do because I'm working with a policy advisory group in Santa Clara that these people that are putting together the new emergency plan, they don't even show up to a meeting. Well, what do you do when they don't take it seriously? Do you because these people are not taking what we're trying to do very seriously at all when it comes to emergency preparedness without a good accounting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern, right? Is, hey, we're gonna provide
Vance,
input.
can you just repeat the questions? Some of us missed a part of it.
Yeah, so I think David was saying, you know, hey, look, he's part of this group in Santa Clara and they're providing advice on the integration of an emergency operation plan. But what do you do if the advice you're giving isn't being accepted, received, or implemented? Right? And
Yeah,
it's a great question because that's a challenge, right? We know that, you know, look, if you put forward 10 recommendations, it's unrealistic to think all 10 are going to go through. But if there's a core recommendation, if there's a key item and you just feel like it's not being addressed and that's going to create a gap and inequities, you know, what do? Well, you do a couple of things. I mean, one is you document, right? But two, David, you give me a call and just let me know because I'd like a heads up on that. But
okay,
I
well,
interact with those jurisdictions.
yeah,
But also now we've got a little bit of a safety net that's starting to get built in, right? Which is if a jurisdiction isn't taking feedback, then we tend to find out about it because, for example, on our one of the questions that they have to answer now, when a county turns in its emergency operation plan, is does your jurisdiction have a access to emergency needs advisory group? The second question is, if so, who's on it? And then we ask for each section of the plan, tell us how you incorporated your advisory group in the development of this section. Right? So what I think we would find is if there's a jurisdiction that's just not listening to its advisory group, that there's going to be gaps in each section of those plans. And they're also going to have a hard time answering the question about the interaction that they had with their committee. And so that's what's so great about AB 580 is it now allows for us to kind of really get in and peel back some layers. Whereas before it would have been very easy for a jurisdiction to say, yep, and then move right on. You know, now it's like, okay, yeah, but show me. And, you know, I will say that we've been really impressed with the vast majority of counties because, you know, really, I mean, you have good people trying to do really great things. And what we've heard back from the counties is, hey, these bills allow us to tap into a source of knowledge and expertise that we didn't have. And now that we have it, we can do something with it. And we're seeing jurisdictions that move away from my plan and it becomes our plan, right? And communities that have a community plan respond quicker and they recover more effectively.
And Cindy Soto has a question. Have you heard of a proposed policy that will be presented by Assembly Member Mullins called Next Gen 911? Ultimately, if passed, this policy will greenlight funding to explore and add text capabilities to 911 and GPS tracking.
So the good news is we can do text to 911 now throughout the state, which is fantastic. In terms of Next Gen 911, June, if it's of interest to the group, I'm happy to reach out to our team and get you guys a briefing on that. And also to learn more about what, in terms of accessibility, is happening on the 911 front. We've got an incredible team that does that. Cal OES oversees 911 for the state. through the PSAPs. And so I'm happy to arrange for that. I know we've got just another minute or two left on this, but if ever the group wants to have a real meaningful dialogue on that, let me know. Happy to set that up.
That'd be great. Yeah, maybe you could set up a community briefing on that. Next, and we still have 30 minutes left, so we're good.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was 11:30.
No, we're good. So Kristen has a question. She's part of the safety plan to discuss plan discussion last year for school site. It was clear that accessibility was not part of the plan. What is being done to make sure that school sites with accessibility by elevator and stairs to second floors have something in place to assist those with physical disabilities? Are public schools held at a different standard?
So I think what you're asking then is things like evacuation chairs, right? Is a school required to have one? And the answer is that there is no real consistency on that front, right? There are ADA requirements, and then there's the accessibility requirements associated with California state law. But those don't mandate that there be a certain number of resources like evacuation chairs. And so it becomes really problematic, especially once you look at like a dorm setting, right? Okay, you're in college, you live in the dorms. How many evacuation chairs are there? Is there one at every door? To the stairs, right? If there's two sets of stairs to go down, is it one on every floor? Is it one on the bottom? And so that's a real challenge. And I know in talking to universities, they're trying to come up with what's the right number, and also which of all the evacuation chairs should we get? And then of course the cost associated with that. And so they're trying to figure that out. But no, there is no very clear guidance on it, and there's no mandate that requires them to have a certain number.
But that's several years ago, I worked, because Dawn had a question about the higher ed level, community colleges, universities, colleges. Several years ago, I remember there being some kind of directive that higher ed work on their emergency plan, and it had levels of detail in them. I still think whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, it's really up to us to be the advocates that keep asking, where are the evacuation devices? Who knows how to use them? And in higher ed, with a very transient population that changes classes every 90 minutes or whatever, what's the responsibility for orientation during a new semester in the class or quarter or whatever? Anyway, just my editorial comment. Couldn't resist, sorry.
Yeah, no, and that's, again, especially like in dorms, I mean, they should have them. RAs should be trained on how to use them. People need to know what they are, where they are, and how they work. And you touched on something very briefly, but I think it's important to highlight that with so many of these things, it really does take us being our own best advocate, we want for the laws and the regulations to be put in such a way that these things get addressed, but that doesn't cover every circumstance. And so we have to be our own best advocates on it.
There's a question in here from Ron Hellock. I think it was just came to me, but it's a good question. Is Enhanced 911 the same as Smart 911 system? Contra Costa County has 4 cities under Smart 911. Will there be funding for cities to get Smart 911? So,
Yeah, so there's Smart 911, there's Next Gen 911, there's Enhanced 911. And that's why I'm saying I think if we're gonna have I'd feel more comfortable bringing on our 911 experts to be able to talk you through not just what are the differences with all those, but what specifically is California doing and where are we at in the adoption and rollout on each of those.
and I think that's good. I'll take a crack at Ron's question about Smart 911. That is a product, a very nice product, is my editorial comment, that jurisdictions can buy. And the reason it's a nicer product is that anybody can register their household information. It's just not disability oriented, but anybody can register, maybe they have a wheelchair user as part of the household, or they have somebody with epilepsy, or they have people who are dependent on life sustaining power. Anyways, it's a product, Ron, that has to be purchased by the jurisdiction. So it's different than Next Gen 911. Dawn wants to know, does anyone know how to use the evac chairs? There are chairs, there are slides.
That's a good question.
Students with disabilities should be used during evacuation drills. Yeah, but are often left out. Can they make dorms with floor level reserved for accessible rooms?
Yeah, I think that's, each campus has their own kind of way of tackling and addressing those issues. And, I got a question for you on the evacuation chair side. Can we make one chair that's comfortable? I mean, holy smokes, I had to use one of those. And I felt like I was in some sort of a medieval torture device. I almost wanted to just, roll the dice and so let me just try going down in my actual chair, So yeah, we got a long ways to go on those.
And the devil's in the detail with those, Vance, because it often depends on the nature of the stairwell and the nature of who's going to be available to use them. Some are really easy to use with one user. Some take people who have considerable strength. Some people have a turning radius that won't work in certain stairwells, etc. So there's a lot of detail to be had when we talk about evacuation devices. I think, yeah, comfort is cool, but is it's your life for comfort? We learned a lot, and lots of great stories after 9/11 and the Twin Towers, and who survived by using these devices and who didn't. There were great stories. Let's see, what else do we have? Question from Brenna Garcia.
Hi, I had a question in regards to the emergency system for 911. So everything requires electricity, but if there's a power outage, how do those actually work? So for us personally, I decided to opt in for the copper line. I don't get AT&T Uverse because it strictly runs on electricity. So you can't call 911 out of your home unless you say, no, I don't want AT&T Uverse. I want AT&T landline, copper line. So do those 911 specialty things work actually with it. Copper line, so it doesn't require electricity. I'm not exactly sure what those do.
Sure. So, and it's a good question. And there's a couple, I think, answers there. So one, like the
Thank
product
you.
Jen was talking about, is one where you simply reach out and you're letting them know about the circumstance or situation in your home. Right. And that way, if they get called to your house, either because you call them or for whatever reason they're going there, when they look up your address, it'll have that information in their system. So that doesn't, it's not impacted by whether or not you have power or not. Right? Your information will still be in their system. And then, you know, on the other front, when you're talking about things like text to 911, that's all through smartphone devices. So if the cell tower is down, then you can't send a text, and that you're not going to be able to text 911 either. That's good. You got the copper line though.
Yeah, and can I add, Vance, just to make it more plain language, your copper line, it also, if you have an RJ11 jack that you're plugged into the wall for a landline phone, those can be more resilient in emergencies than what Vance, your point about the cell towers. I think what we've learned is that the cruel truth is that they are, when they still function, they're backed up with battery power, and that battery power may not last too long. So I got that right, Vance?
Also, the copper line is great for floods. We live by the levee, so.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see what else here. Question.
Can I take just one quick second and just make a shameless plug? I'm going to put a link in the box here. Remember I said earlier that we're looking to hire a new team member? So they just announced the position through Cal Careers. I put the link there. So anybody that's interested in joining my team, we've got a position. We're looking for to add somebody. This is specifically to do incident support. So whenever the balloon goes up, this individual would deploy to our state operations center and also into the field. So this is a great opportunity, and definitely want to make sure the community is aware about it. So if you click on the link that I put there, it will give you all the details, what the job is, who qualifies, and how to apply.
Hey, Vance, this is David.
Hey, David.
If there's any way I become part of your team, let me know. You know my background in this area.
Yeah, except for right now, I work for you, David. You know.
So
Yeah,
Vance,
but if there's anything you need, let me know.
I appreciate it. Thanks, David.
Vance, another question here is what you said about the local emergency operation plans. What are you all going to be using a checklist that the locals will get ahead of time, so they have a heads up on the kind of things you're looking for, and may actually be motivated to do the work before they submit it for review?
Yeah, so we have what's called a crosswalk, and it basically outlines, like, here's what's supposed to be in your plan. And so, like, on the left-hand column, it says, you're supposed to have X, Y, and Z in your plan. Do you have X? And then on the right-hand column, you would say, yes, here's where it's in the plan. Here's how we address it. And that's for each element of the plan, not just access and functional needs.
Is that available for us to look at?
I'm sure we can get you a copy of the crosswalk, sure.
Great, good, thank you.
I'm gonna ask you to send me an email reminder though.
Okay. There's comments in the chat about, there is a California Association of Campus Security Officers, and there's a link. They may or may not be helpful. I've worked with some of them on some campuses that will remain anonymous, and some of them are very good and some of them don't have a lot of knowledge in this area. Okay, let's see, other hands, let's see. Other questions? Ron.
Hi, June. Hi, Vance.
there.
Nice to see you guys again. I'm really concerned about what's going on, especially with the targeted violence and what happened over in Sacramento and also New York. Is there going to be? We've taken your course, the Run, Hide, and Fight, but I'm just wondering if there's going to be any type of update. It seems to be something that we have to be very concerned with, and I know that Homeland Security has come up with a targeted violence training. And that I've taken, but I really want to find out if there's something that California is going to be putting out. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And Ron, you've been such a great partner in helping us do those deliveries. What he's talking about is active shooter training and the awareness training there. That before it was just always run, hide, fight. And I would say, well, you lost me at run, right? So we needed to have an awareness and a guidance that was inclusive of everybody's needs, including their physical abilities. And so what we use now in the state of California is the nation's first integrated active shooter awareness guidance. And training that happens, which we're glad has been picked up by other states and jurisdictions. Yeah, Ron, we should definitely talk doing an add-on to that or an update. I think is probably appropriate. So yeah, happy to have that conversation.
That'll be great. I'd love to sit down and see if we can work something out. I think it's, especially now, I mean, it's everybody from organizations, they're wondering, well, how do we prepare? It's a fluid kind of a situation. So yes, let's have a sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Vance Jr., want to get your opinion about after action reports and hot washes, the things that help to evaluate what was good, what didn't work, what needs work, after an emergency. So I just wondered what your take was. Sometimes I've experienced these after action reports as more of a political look good document than a sincere attempt to really evaluate what needs work. So just wondered about your take on that.
I mean, I can tell you just from our own experience of doing these after action reports, but, the intent is always sincere. We always want to get better. Right? We always want to improve. I think what becomes really challenging is that we're dealing with so many disasters. And really what's happened is that instead of dealing with one disaster at a time, we found ourselves dealing with multiple incidents at the same time. And so these reports they stack up, you know what I mean? And so a lot of times what's happening is we'll do a hot wash and we'll definitely, through our experience and our coordination from one disaster to the next, improve. Where I think we have to do a better job is making sure that those improvements get memorialized. Right? So we need to do a better job of churning out guidance and lessons learned and best practices. Because our knowing it is great, but we have to push that on to everyone else. So that's an area where we need to improve.
Yeah, at the state level, thanks, Vance. I think better guidance, quicker guidance, granular, robust guidance would be good. Sometimes these after action reports take forever at the local level as well. And by the time they reach the public, they are so homogenized, whitewashed, cleansed that they're not very informative about what needs work, in my humble opinion. So let's see. I have heard typically say to just stay at, this is again about evacuation procedures. I've heard people say just stay at the top of the stairwell in the refuge area and wait for someone to come for you. If anyone notifies first responders that you are there. This is a scary proposal. It takes a very short time to succumb to smoke from a fire. It feels horrible for people to be left behind while the rest of the panicking people are running out. And that's from Dawn Albright. And I'll add, Dawn, that in the disability community, some of us have referred to these areas of refuge assistance. We call them crib ovens, because the code and the newer codes, that the real areas of safe refuge have a 2-hour supposedly, smoke and fire wall. But will first responders be called? And is your question? And second, or may they be overwhelmed and not come? So what's the plan? So over to you, Vance, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about individual buildings and towns and cities and companies and organizations, it's just, there's so much variability. There is no standard practice that covers all those bases. So, yeah, no, I've been in that situation where it's like, I can see there's smoke and I hear the fire truck and you're telling me just to hang out. So this doesn't feel good, And I've been the guy in the evacuation chair too. And I've been the guy that snuck down the elevator, So yeah, it's just I think it's interesting. If you look at like NFPA or these other standard development organizations, they're going to come up with standards on pipes and on hoses and on hydrants and all this stuff, but how about tackling this as a standard? Right? How about if having a way that all firefighters are trained, all first responders are trained on how to address these type of issues? So that's outside of Cal OES's hands, but it is an area that I would absolutely say has to be addressed.
And Vance, back to on chat and back to the university focus and on our advocacy. Alexandra Anders says, having an accessibility working group that can develop guidance and training for individual campuses and explain the need for and vet disability partners could make it easier for folks to work with individual campuses, pointing out examples from their safety peers as well as legal responsibilities. Good comment, and I would add that also works on individual campuses if there's the bandwidth to do that. I've been a part of that on campuses where it's only when we, just like all of you on this call, sit there at the table and say, what about this? What about this? So, important comment. The link is up. I mean, the poll is up. So, I urge you to take the poll and urge you to do Survey Monkey if the poll is not accessible to you. And we have about, just 5 minutes left. So I'll just say, Vance, thank you for a very diverse and robust conversation and helping to peel some of the onion we're always trying to peel in terms of the complexity and nuances of all of these disability and disaster and inclusion issues. So I bet we could go on for hours if we had the opportunity. So a big thank you to you. And with 5 minutes left, any more questions or comments? I see one hand from Brenna.
Hi, thank you. So for the college campus issue, I think it should be privy to include a accessibility training for those who are taking any type of policing or because when I went to college, there was courses to help individuals get on track for becoming officers. And so I think that just kind of falls in a line with fire and rescue and all that. And it would just be kind of like something to add into their training that they should be adept to doing, so that if anything did actually happen at the school that they go to and attend, they could actually participate in something that's actionable with what they've been trained to do.
Important comment. Vance, any last words with 3 minutes left?
I just want to thank everybody. It's been a really good dialogue. I've appreciated it. I think there's certainly things that there's always things we can do and we can do better. Then there are things that maybe I can't do, I don't fall into the scope of OES, but are important to know about and to talk about and to push on. And I think ultimately we're all in that same spot where we have to be active in trying to affect the change that we need within our own spheres of influence. I'm just a big believer in that sense. I tell that story about the little bird laying on its back and it says, well, And why are you laying on your back? Your legs are up in the air, and the bird says, well, I heard the sky was going to fall and I'm going to catch it. And this notion that like this little bird, this tiny little legs, surely can't hold up the sky. And the bird's response, of course, being, I get it. My legs are small and they're weak. And I couldn't possibly hold up the sky, but we each do what we can. Right? And that's June, and that's me, and that's Ron and David and Brenna and everybody else. Right? That there's not any one of us that can do it on our own. But collectively, as we each do what we can, we start to see important progress and improvements in these areas. We've seen a lot of that. But we're not ready to hang up that mission accomplished banner. Right? We've come a long way. We've still got a long way to go. I appreciate everybody being on this together.
Thanks, Vance. Well said. It's better to do something than nothing. And remember that our advocacy does make the dents and does pay off, even if it's just grabbing for the small hanging fruit. So thanks again, Vance, and all of you for the privilege of your time, and look forward to your being with us next month when we do the same kind of dialogue with the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. Stay safe. Take care.